All right. Welcome to another edition of Talking the Torah with Sabbath Lounge. This is Matt.
And Jake here.
We're glad you joined us. And today we're going to talk about week 6. And so this is generations, Genesis 25, yes. 19 through 28:9. And it's Toldot. And so we picked this lovely image that seems to fit the story.
It encapsulates the heart of the story perfectly.
Yes.
The essence of it.
Yes, and so you have this red, hairy person and someone grabbing his heel at birth.
Yeah. And a yellow man.
And
grabbing
yes.
his feet.
Yes.
So
that's right. So we will find out more about this. And it's also, I put in here that it's the heel grabber.
Yes. I think that's accurate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you do have this story of the heel grabbing and a meal, and that's all in here. And so let's take a look at it. And so in Genesis, so Jake explained some of the controversy about this heel grabbing thing. Most people are familiar with the story already.
Yeah. So the heel grabbing business is such that Jacob grabs the heel of Esau and Tarzan's out of the womb, and then later he's the supplanter, right? So he's
some people call him trickster.
Yes. He's gone in and snuck around to trick Esau and supplant him and take his birthright from him that was rightfully his because tradition and all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the thing we want to more hone in on in this.
One, don't you think people think of Jacob as being a trickster? That he's this guy that's constantly tricking people to bend and get his will. And I'm not so sure if that's a correct way to think about him or not.
Well,
I've definitely thought about him that way.
Yeah, and clearly the people that he deals with think of him that way.
Yeah.
But how does Yahweh look at him, right? A lot of times we want to look at people through the eyes of other people, mm-hmm. especially in the stories in the Bible, but it's, what's Yahweh thinking of Jacob? Yeah. And one thing that I think is interesting that gets missed just because of the wording is it says in, verse 27, it says, chapter 25, Genesis 25:27, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter. The hunters are always like the bad guys, kind of, or the lesser righteous guys. Anyway, he was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man. Now, that word plain there is Tom. Now, what it means is, is perfect or complete, sound, wholesome, complete, morally innocent, having integrity.
Yeah.
So Jacob, contrary to how Isaac and Esau take his actions, he was an upstanding, morally righteous man with integrity.
Yeah.
So it says it right in the scripture. So when you look at his actions,
were you reading that from his name?
No, it says.
Oh,
it says Jacob was a plain man, and mm-hmm. the word "plain" there is those things. So, not
where we look at that and go, "Oh, he was kind of ordinary."
Yeah, he was
very
just
exciting,
some rando that you couldn't pick out of a crowd. But no, so he's an upright man, and so
do upright men, are they about trickery?
Not in my.
I don't think so.
Not in my experience.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So when you find that out, that he is an upright man, how do you then have to look at the scriptures you're reading and understand it properly? Mm-hmm. Because it has to. Two things I hate is hypocrisy and contradiction, especially like in Scripture, especially. And so once there's this contradiction or this hypocritical kind of nature to Jacob, where he's a righteous man, but he's tricking people. Trickery isn't righteous, so there you got this conflict that you have to address.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point for sure. So, but I have taught that before, and I have believed that. But the more I study Torah, the more I'm like, I think that may be a misinterpretation of these scriptures, and it's definitely, it makes me think of when Yeshua tells them to go out and be innocent as dove and wise as serpent. Is that what he says?
Yeah.
And so it's that concept. And so Jacob was innocent, but he was wise as the serpent, and he knew, and I think that's kind of, to me, that's the kind of person that I see here.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it.
So,
and one thing, and maybe it'll come up later in the
so these are just some thoughts that I have about this, and so I didn't mean to advance here, so let me go back here. So the birthright blessing, this is a concept that we see all through the Torah, through the text, that and often the firstborn, so this won't be the first time we see it, but the firstborn is technically, biologically, the rightful heir.
Right.
And, and still even to this day, that's often followed in families. And it hadn't been that long since that was really practiced. It does, maybe not necessarily true, but, a couple of generations before us in America, that was still pretty much true.
Yeah, it's kind of how things went.
Especially if you're the man and you're the firstborn, you probably got first dibs on everything.
Yeah.
And everyone else, got what was left over. So that's a common thing, but you missed something here, and it was about Jacob was about his father's business. He was the one that was interested in building the kingdom, and in building his father's kingdom over even his own self-interest. And so that's the kind of guy Jacob is. And so I used to teach that he was kind of and so there's a lot of parallels to Joseph. There's a lot of parallels to Yeshua. And I always thought of Joseph and Jacob both kind of being a little bit girly and Esau being manly. And I think a lot of people think about that, but I don't think that's fair.
Well, yeah, you said he seems kind of like a mama's boy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
love you, Mom.
Yes. And I don't know that that's fair about him. I definitely thought that at one time, but there is something interesting there with the mother and the son.
Yeah.
And even in the lineage of Yeshua, where, most likely it's Mary's lineage that goes back to Abraham and not Joseph's. I mean, there's like a whole thing in itself, and I'm not trying to talk about that today. But bottom line is, Jacob is blessed because he was about his father's business.
Right.
And so you see this concept with Esau. So, Jacob was about the affairs of his fathers and the affairs of Elohim. So Joseph is also like this. And so you see this, and you see this contrast between someone trying to do the will of their father and someone who does what they want.
Right. And then, and like you're saying here, their brothers, Joseph's brothers and Esau in this case, they're interested in self-interest, right? They have the self-interest and personal gain in mind, and whereas Jacob and Joseph are about the will of Yahweh.
Ryan, you see this story where the birthright is supposedly stolen. Well, Esau gives it away. He doesn't fight for it. He doesn't put up any kind of fight. He's just like, I'm hungry. I don't care. Whatever. Just give me the bowl of soup. Would you just quit talking? Because you also get this thing where I feel like Esau, he's a man of few words. He's like, food. I want now. That's how, Esau strikes me as that guy.
Yeah.
He definitely strikes me as the guy. I told you I loved you 30 years ago. Do I have to say it again? Come on. What do you want from me? I said it twice.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems like he's that guy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I always picture you see the caveman dragging the lady back to the cave or whatever with his club.
Yeah.
I kind of get that picture.
Yeah. He's conquering. He is the alpha male, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about, I'm an alpha male, and they're so proud of this sometimes. And I'm like, is that a good thing?
They're proud of, what their hand can bring and what they can, with their strengths.
And at the same time, I certainly say I lean more towards that. But, because men are supposed to be manly and strong, and our society and our world tries to make us girly. And I say, fight that.
Yes.
But I do think Jacob sometimes is unfairly painted as maybe this mama's boy. And it was more about his heart. And his heart was about the kingdom and about his father's business over his own self-interest. He was willing to lay that down.
Yeah. And like he was, we get the idea that maybe he was soft. But I mean, how many of us are going to go wrestle an angel?
Yeah. And soft, I don't think these other people in his life called him soft. They're like, man, you got to be careful when you mess with that guy, because he's going to, he's going to get his way.
Yeah.
So, so that we don't often think about him that way, but I think that's how Esau saw him for sure. And Laban later.
Mm-hmm.
So, be like Jacob. Esau wasn't interested. He didn't give a rip about the blessing, about his birthright. He just wants to fill his stomach. He's interested in how he can provide with his own two hands and the work that he can do. And in a lot of ways, you have Cain and Abel. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing. And then it's interesting that here you have Jacob, who represents Israel. And then you have Esau, to me, represents man. I'm going to go back to the day 6 people. But to me, Esau is a representation of that concept of the day 6 people who just do their thing. And where Jacob represents the priesthood. And he represents being Yahuwah's representative on earth to other people. Mm-hmm. And Esau just is doing his own will, living for the moment. And it's really what we see in modern man, today, building their own kingdoms and their own, there's no room for a God in their life. Right. They are the God.
Right.
Their stomach is their God. Mm-hmm. And so it's their direct contrast. I mean, so if you've never studied studied that concept of Jacob choosing to be about his father's business and Esau choosing to be and do what he wants, that's a whole thing in itself, and you should check that out.
Right.
Because it's a theme. It runs through this. Yeah, it's all over the place. So just like the wedding runs through it, Jacob and Esau, it runs through the whole story. So, and I put in here, if you've been like Esau, it's time to be different. It's time to turn around, and be.
What do you call that? Turning around?
Repentance.
Oh,
time to repent. And
that's also a theme.
Yes, it is. And then I put in here, heaven isn't for everyone. And, and that's kind of a strange concept. You don't hear a lot of preachers saying that heaven isn't for everyone. And
yeah.
I don't know that a preacher has ever stood up and said that.
No, because then the backlash on that would always be, well, God so loved the world, he gave his only son, right? Mm-hmm. That none should perish, right?
So what do you think that means, me saying heaven isn't for everyone, with Jacob and Esau?
I think that's absolutely true, and it's based on, some people choose that they're not interested in it. They choose not to go be with Yahweh. If you spent your whole life not wanting to get to know Yahweh or be with him, why would you want to spend eternity with him?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think about.
Yeah, there. And I wrote a post about this on the blog a few years ago. My aunt Ann died, and Ann was like Jacob, and her brother, which is my grandfather, was Esau. And my grandfather, he did what he wanted to do. He wasn't about his father's business. He basically abandoned his faith, abandoned everything he was taught, and accepted what man said to be true. He went off to college, and when the college told him about evolution and Darwin and all that. He was in the 50s. He was like, oh, all that stuff I learned as a kid, that was garbage. My dad was stupid.
Yeah.
And he rebelled. And he became like Esau. She went off to school. She heard those same things, and she came back, and she was about her father's business and helped her family.
Yeah.
And so in your own family, you probably can see people that have made these choices to be like Jacob or be like Esau. And you certainly see it out in the world. It's everywhere. But it's a choice. We all have the choice to pursue the birthright. The birthright blessing is there for all of us, and we can either choose that, and it tends to be a narrow path. It tends to be more difficult, and the other path is broad and wide
and faces Sodom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one of the more beneficial things to me, and I don't know how much of this is like, I haven't done the study into why, what people turn away from their faith once they walk, once they are out on their own and stuff like that. But I think one of the things that really was beneficial to me was my parents prepared me for that, saying people will come and try to tell you this isn't true. People will try to sway you into thinking that that this Bible is not accurate. And so I think knowing that ahead of time, you're on guard to that stuff, and then it's harder to trick you into thinking, oh, well, that there's some merit there, because we know that the tricks of Satan are to turn us against it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know how much of that is, works, and how much of it is it worked for me, but that's something that I instill in my kids too, is watch out, because people will come and tell you this isn't right.
And I think that's going back to you're teaching your children how to be innocent as doves, but shrewd as snakes.
Yeah.
To be wise and be aware.
Yeah.
And so, so you've got this concept, the hill grabber, supplanter. I encourage you to go research these things, check it out, challenge maybe how you've thought about it before. But there is clearly a definite difference between being about your father's business and doing what you want to do. And so even doing things like keeping a Sabbath makes you about your father's business. It makes you, as opposed to, I'm going to go do work and I got to feed my family, I got to pay my bills, I got to work on Saturday. That's
a worldly concept. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So got to get rich or die trying kind of concept. And that seems to be kind of who Esau is. And I also think there's an element here in Esau that, he's a pretty scary guy. The legend in like the book of Jasher says that Esau kills Nimrod, which would make him a bad mamma jamma.
Mamma jamma.
Mm-hmm, so somebody that you might be a little afraid of.
Yeah. Now, is there a difference between, what's your idea of the difference between the blessing that he gives away for that red stuff in the pot versus the blessing that he gets, that Isaac is giving him at the end of his life? What's the difference in the blessings?
I don't know. I hadn't thought much about it.
Well, from my understanding, there is a difference in those blessings. One being the firstborn blessing, and one being like a monetary kind of blessing. I'm not exactly sure the difference, but I think there is a difference. Mm-hmm. If you go look at, and if you study out what those blessings were at the time, and the way that a father blessed his firstborn, I think there were a dual set of blessings that went to the
I've
firstborn.
heard that before. Mm-hmm.
So because I've also thought, well, he gave away his birthright, so it wasn't his to take from Isaac at the end anyway, Esau. Yeah. But I think there is a difference in those blessings.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. And we also kind of failed to mention when we were talking about this, it's a concept of the chosen people, the Jews, versus, the Israelites when Jacob becomes Israel, and so there's definitely a reference, to that, and Israel being blessed because it chooses Yahweh, and that's what makes it blessed, and Esau does not choose that, and relies on its lineage, maybe, which is kind of like relying on its own hands. And so you definitely see this contrast between, it's not about the bloodline, people. And so I think it goes back to that concept of when we talk to people about these things, most people, when you tell them about the things that we're doing, they want to say we're Jews, and they are associating it with a bloodline lineage thing. And this story tells you, yes, there's a bloodline and it's important here, but
Esau did not get the blessing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he was part of the bloodline and technically should have, and he does get something, but Jacob clearly gets the upper hand, and it's because of Jacob's heart and how he lived his life, because it goes back to what you said about him being upright.
Right. And it's this Jacob, or Israel, that we're trying to be grafted into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From Romans 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
don't be Esau.
Don't be Esau.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Because he also, there's so many stories. And so I challenge you, go look at all these characters. And when you start examining them and go look at them, is this person like Jacob or is this person like Esau? And you can start to put people into categories. And you look at someone like Samson. Where does Samson fit in? Is Samson Jacob or is he Israel? And Esau. And then we even talked about David, and we're like, David is also considered ruddy in appearance, which is a word that is described for Esau. And maybe David represents the best of both, and which is kind of an interesting concept and a story for another day.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But the bottom line is there's a lot here, and it's worth spending time thinking about and studying it. And it's real simple too.
Yeah, I think
simple.
Go beyond the second son got the blessing, and where does that theme come out?
Mm-hmm.
Go deeper than that, because that one's kind of obvious, and that's one you're told as if you're churched, that's one you're told growing up. But go deeper than that into the character of each of them and how that theme plays out.
Yeah, for sure. So.
And then one more thing, and then I'm done on the whole, is he a shyster? Was his mother heard Isaac telling Esau what was going to happen. That's how she knew how to send him in, and would she be in that position if Yahweh didn't put her there, so that the one who cared about his plan going forward would get that blessing?
Yeah. Because it does kind of make you wonder, was he getting away from this path a little bit at the end of his life? Did he forget a little bit of, and she kind of brings it back and reminds him, this is important. This is what this is about. But it does kind of make you wonder about him at the end.
Yeah.
So, but also seems very true. And there's many examples of, unfortunately, the generations that follow the patriarch, sometimes things get watered down a little bit and someone comes along and revives it. And, that's a theme in the text too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So, and to continue that, go back to the source. That's we're not claiming that we know all these things. We're claiming to have lots of questions ourselves and trying to figure it out. And we challenge you to spend the time, research, read, and find out what it says for yourself.
Yep.
So we appreciate you listening to week 6 of
Talking the Torah
with Sabbath Lounge. Thank you for tuning in. And always, we ask you to give us a comment, a like, subscribe, share.
All right.
Bye.